I'm saying this fully as a Rocky fan and a current resident of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Creed 3 is the best Creed movie because Rocky is not in it. Having watched the first Creed movie a little while ago, and then rewatching bits of the second Creed movie, it kind of hit me like, it's not just that Rocky is there and Rocky is helping Creed. And like, it makes sense, and I love the Rocky movies. I'm a humongous fan of Rocky. But at the same time, the movies are not necessarily about Adonis's life, right? They're about Adonis's life now and like him falling in love now, but it's all about beating up the demons from Rocky's past, right? Rocky and Creed have this relationship where he made this mistake and didn't throw in the towel, and then Creed was killed during the fight with Drago in Rocky 4. Spoilers for Rocky 4. And in Creed 2, the villain that comes back is Drago's son, and then you also have Drago and like Brigitte Nielsen and the whole Russian group, and it's this like kind of look back at like, oh, Rocky 4, it's like, remember this guy, he wasn't quite as bad as you thought, or like they really didn't really, you know, treat him fairly. Him and Rocky lived different lives. And you look back and you go like, this is technically a villain that killed Creed's dad, Apollo Creed, like killed Adonis Creed's father. But Adonis Creed did not have a very good relationship with his father. Adonis Creed, you know, that clearly upset him that his father was killed. But it wasn't till Creed 3, where he stopped doing Rocky stuff, that this felt like it became a movie about just one guy and his relationships. And we learned a lot about his character and his history and stuff like that. I think it's very telling that this is, for some reason, I don't know why, I haven't looked into it, kind of because I don't want to ruin it for myself. I don't want one to, like, I don't want the story to be that one of them's a jerk or something to the other one. I don't know. I haven't seen why Sylvester Stallone is not in this movie. He's mentioned once or twice in passing that he does not show up, and I think he's kind of sour on it. But again, I don't know if anyone is at fault or what the story is. But I will say, watching this movie, watching Creed 3, you really get the sense that like this is a story about one guy. And obviously Adonis's relationships are important. His relationship with Tessa Thompson, very important, his daughter, and then obviously his relationship with Dame, a character played by Jonathan Majors, who kind of comes from his past. But this is one of the first movies where we are not seeing this character's reaction or how the actions of a Rocky movie affected this character, right? Like, we're not looking at this through the lens of Rocky 4 and going, oh, I see why this is really important to him. I see why this is really special. And we're not looking at this through the lens of Rocky 1, like, oh, he's having his kind of Rocky training montage, and we're doing those things. We do some of those things. We get a training montage in this. You know, obviously, there are some pretty sick boxing scenes. But I do think, looking back at Creed 1 and Creed 2, Creed 1 is very good, and Creed 2 is very interesting. But this is not only probably my favorite, but also it's the one that feels the most like its own thing, which is good, because I was always kind of confused with what these sequels, sidequels, whatever you call them, were. Were they a Creed story, or were they a way to rebrand a Rocky story? And it's like, it's Creed, but it's really Rocky 7, and it's a movie about Rocky being the trainer for Adonis. And I'm not saying in Creed 1 or 2, I think Stallone like overshadows Michael B. Jordan or anything like that, or like he took over the production. I don't think that. I think it's actually really well balanced, but I do think still that balance takes away from making this a full movie about Creed. Like, Mickey is like a side character in the original Rocky movie. He is the trainer who shows up and is like, Rocky, give me a shot. And then he trains him a little bit, and then that's it. He serves a very specific function in Rocky's journey, whereas Rocky in Adonis Creed's journey is more than that. He is like a surrogate father figure. He is a mentor trainer. He fills so many roles that he does take up a lot of space in the narrative. Now, that is not necessarily a bad thing. But I guess I'm really happy that Creed 3 managed to break out of that. And again, I don't know why. And it did not lose what I think is the Rocky charm. It definitely feels like this character is in a different place. He has grown. He is the most famous boxer on earth. He is, I'm assuming, the heavyweight champion of the world if he wanted to be, but he gave up, and now he's just like managing boxers. He's having a great time. But I guess what I'm saying is I was worried that Rocky was not in this movie, because I had heard that going in. I was like, ugh, I wonder why. I wonder what's wrong with it. And again, I don't know. I refuse to look it up. I'll look it up. You guys like this? This is content. Why isn't Rocky in Creed 3? Well, this is weird. Okay, so I looked it up. Stallone says, that's a regretful situation because I know what it could have been. I'll do it in the voice. It was a regretful situation because I know what it could have been. It was taken in a direction that's quite different from where I would have taken it. And then, this is where it gets interesting. It's a different philosophy. Irvin Winkler's and Michael B. Jordan's. I wish them well, but I'm much more of a sentimentalist. I like my heroes getting beat up. I don't just want them going into dark spaces. I just feel people have enough darkness. So, I've seen the movie. I don't think this is that much darker of a Rocky movie than Rocky 4. And I don't want to say why or like get into specifics because that ruins some of the fun. Like minor, teeny tiny, the basic story elements of this movie. Adonis Creed goes through some stuff and he has some trouble from his past that comes back in the form of Jonathan Majors, Damon. But it's not like that different from like it's Rocky 4. A man is killed in the ring. His wife watches, and apparently his son that is not in the picture is also really affected by that. I'm not going to say this movie doesn't have anything that's that dark, but I'm just saying this is like the Rocky movies aren't not dark. Rocky 1 is like a mob enforcer beating up guys and breaking hands, or not breaking hands, but like he's doing that job. And I think that's the charm of the Rocky movies is they're gritty and they're real and, you know, to some extent, sometimes they have little robots in them. But like in general, they feel more grounded than other sports movies. And part of it is that the first one was made very cheaply by a person who's very passionate about it. And it just had that authenticity and that charm. And it's about this very authentic person going up against this, you know, big multimedia celebrity kind of guy. So like the plot of the movie was a metaphor for the movie itself. It was perfect if for that reason. But like, this isn't that different from that. This is just a different story, but like Rocky's story is quite dark. Adonis's story is dark in the beginning, especially like this prologue and why he had a decent life, whereas Dame had a really bad life and he went to jail and now he's out. And the tension between those two characters, like it's dark, but I wouldn't say it wouldn't fit in with a Rocky movie. Like, I don't know. That's a weird thing to say, Stallone. I don't know too much about Stallone. It is a shame though, because this movie's really good. And I think it is very much not necessarily a modernization of Rocky 3 or Rocky 4, but a logical kind of endpoint in this story. Like if you think about Rocky 4, which is the last good one, I don't know. Rocky 5, I've seen bits and pieces, but I've heard it's not great. But if you look at Rocky 4, the villain is somewhat personal because he does, you know, obviously kills Apollo Creed in the ring, but it's not the connection is not quite as meaningful as in this movie where Dame is a person who represents this side of Adonis. They just kind of tried to, you know, put in a box and, you know, distance himself from coming back into his life and kind of messing things up. So I don't know. I just think as a third bit in this movie where he has already won all the boxing tournaments and, you know, had two incredible fights at the end of two movies, Creed 1 and Creed 2, where like you never think he's going to do it and he does it and he struggles and whatever. You can't do that in a third movie, right? Because that'd be boring. But what they do instead is they make this new struggle so personal. And I think that's really smart. And it is also a very physical, like demanding, you know, challenge and fight that Adonis has to get ready for. But it's this assault on two fronts that makes this movie so interesting, and I would say more interesting than Creed 1 and Creed 2. If you're wondering what it's with these edit points, it's usually me calling the Creed movies Rocky or calling Adonis Apollo. I just can't. I'm having so much trouble with the names. But yeah, because overall I really like this movie. I think Creed 3 is, I'd have to watch it again, but it's got a good shot at being my favorite one of these. I think it's really interesting the way that the story plays out. Obviously, Jonathan Majors is incredibly charismatic. He's one of those guys that we're all just gonna be like, oh yeah, he's the guy now. Where he's the best one and he's gonna be in everything. On top of that, and like I saw an interview where Michael B. Jordan said that this movie was inspired by anime, specifically I think Full Metal Alchemist and Naruto, and then some others I wasn't even familiar with. I've always heard that that's his thing. That's why the Vegeta costume looks so similar to the Killmonger costume is because they're kind of the same guy, and you know they use that influence for the costume. So when I heard that, I was like, okay, but I mean, this is a first time director. Michael B. Jordan directed this thing. He's starring in this thing. How good can it be? It's pretty good. And rewatching Creeds 1 and 2 and some of those fight scenes, this movie is far more dynamic when it comes to how they film this. And also it gets a little more, it's doing things with this story that are innovating in a way that, because you watch Creed 2, let's say, the big fight with Drago at the end, it looks like Rocky 1 or Creed 1 or Rocky 4, right? Boxing, they haven't changed too much about how that's shot. And I do think it's still, they're top tier. Like, is this as good as it gets? But, you know, we're not reinventing the wheel here. And that's another thing where, like, if this was that again, I think I'd be a little less hot on this. I'd be like, yeah, I've seen this before. It's cool that this character is doing it now, but, like, it's different. But I do think they're able to do a lot more with editing. The fighting feels a little bit more superhuman in a way that is not like Fast and Furious, where they're, you know, driving the cars with their mind and falling out of space, but in that, like, the action feels so dynamic and so dramatic that we are so frequently just genuinely scared that these guys are going to punch the other one's head off. And also there's some stuff that is done in this movie that is kind of unusual, I would say, more artistic than I've seen in a Rocky movie so far. Obviously, the performances beyond Jonathan Majors are great. Michael B. Jordan, very good. I think it's an interesting point in Michael B. Jordan's life to be making this movie. He just got his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, so he is kind of in this same spot that Adonis is in, where he is on top of the world. And it's like, what's the expectations? How do you kind of distance yourself from your past? And so that there's interesting stuff there. And I think the music is great. I always like the music in these movies, and this is probably my favorite one. They have not released the soundtrack yet, but I definitely want to get at it because I want to make it my new running soundtrack. So overall, Creed 3 is really good. It may be the best Creed movie. That's hard to say, but I do think, for me, it's the first Creed movie that feels just like a Creed movie, and that's pretty cool.